It's great to be here. And normally I have a handout per se, but as you see, my handout today is an article I wrote. It's an article I wrote really summarizing the verses. The title of the article is, God Helped Elijah, He Will Help You. However, the title of this presentation, I would put it this way, is 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. So let's turn over to 1 Kings. And I asked how long I have to speak, and Johnny said about 3 hours. No, he said, can you do it within an hour? And I said, I'm sure I can. As I told him, though, 20 minutes of a bad sermon is too long, and 60 minutes of a good sermon is okay. So it really comes down to the material. And as I like to say when I go to speak places, I'm a very flawed speaker. I don't doubt that, don't deny that, but my material is great. And you'll see my material is great because I get it straight from the Word. So we're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 19. Let me give you a little background about 1 Kings 19. A little background is maybe you've been discouraged in life. If you've been discouraged in life, this presentation, this material from the Bible will help you. Or maybe you're not discouraged in life, but certainly you're around people who are. So this material can either help you today, or it can help you help somebody else. Either way, it's good material. There were 5 people in the Bible who wanted to die, had even thoughts of killing themselves. Now, obviously, no one ever wants to take their own life. But anyone, if you've had those notions, this material can help you. Or if you've been around people who have those notions, this material can help you. By the way, these are famous people. Maybe you've recognized them before. Moses, Elijah, Job, Jeremiah, Jonah. All 5 of them made statements about, maybe it'd be best that I was dead. By the way, those all are imperfect people, but there was another man I know, you might remember his name, he said something like, I am sorrowed unto death. Even the Son of Man was really, when he was saying that prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was really emotionally beat down and he was very sad. So there's nothing wrong with you feeling moments of sadness, but you have to work through them like the 5 men did, and of course Christ was always perfect. But even those 5 men who were sinners, they worked through it. And so the material I'm giving you today is to help you work through situation, and if you don't ever deal with those kind of situations, you might know people who do. So anyway, we're going to talk about 1 Kings 19, but before we do, let's let some background. We'll just look at 1 Kings 17. We'll look at some background leading up to chapter 19. Chapter 19, I'm going to give you 7 points from the scripture. We'll go through those 7 points. But chapter 17, verse 1 shows something I find very interesting. 1 Kings 17:1, Elijah the Tishbite of the inhabitants of Gilead went to King Ahab. That'd be like you going to President Biden, the Supreme Court, the Congress, the leaders of the land. You went to the leaders of the land, and he had a message from God. Now, what we don't know about this message, we don't know the tone of his voice. All we do, we see the words. The Bible gives us the words. The Bible does not give us the tone of his voice. So thereby, in the future, we'll find out what his tone was. But maybe his tone was this way. Maybe. As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years except at my word. I don't think that is, but it could be. Or it could be this way. As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years except at my word. Well, I don't know, but I tend to think it's more of the second, more of a challenging thing. But again, I don't know how much he would soft pedal it, because if you're standing before the Supreme Court or the president, you might want to be real careful what you say. But here he is very bold. He's talking about saying, you're not going to have any rain until God tells me, and then I'll tell you. Pretty bold. But I like verse 2, what happens next. Because he probably has a lot of confidence right now, a lot of confidence. And he's probably thinking, what next? Who do I go to talk to next? Who's next? In verse 3, the word of the Lord comes and says, get away from here and go east. So he could be thinking east. In our scenario, okay, I'm in D.C., am I going over to Spain? A little northeast to England? Am I going to Ukraine, Russia, China? Where am I going next to give this valuable, important message from God? He said, go east and hide. Hide? Are you kidding me? I just laid out my guts to the king. I just laid out my guts to and you're telling me I should now is a time to hide? That's not giving me a lot of confidence. What's going on here? So again, he gives this powerful message, and then he hides. And then, of course, when he's hiding there, he meets the widow. And the widow doesn't have enough food, they think, but God makes you know the story, how God makes the food multiply and feeds them all. You know the story about later on in chapter 17, how the widow's son dies, and God uses the hands of Elijah to heal the widow's son. Then we come to chapter 18. Again, this is all build up to what we're going to read in chapter 19. This is all build up to what he's going to face. So in chapter 18, he said, go present to Ahab. Verse 3, Ahab had talked to Obadiah, who was in charge of his house, and Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For so it was while Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 in a cave, and fed them water. So there was some shenanigans going on between Jezebel and the people. And so Ahab had talked to Obadiah, and Obadiah, they both then went their way. Verse 6, they divided the land between them to explore it. Ahab went one way by himself, Obadiah went another way by himself. Okay, they're looking for, one thing they're looking for Elijah. Well, verse 7, this is one of my humorous parts of the Bible I love. As Obadiah was on his way, suddenly Elijah met him and recognized him and fell on his face, and he says, is that you, my lord Elijah? And he said, yes, it is. Go tell your master, go tell Ahab that Elijah's here. This is the part that's humorous, because I'm going to paraphrase what he said. Are you nuts? I'm not going to go tell Ahab you're here, because Ahab's trying to get you, and so now I'll go tell him you're here. He'll come look for you. You won't be here, and he'll take it out on me. Are you crazy? I am not going to tell Ahab you're here. Go tell him yourself. I don't want to be the middleman. I don't want to be the middleman. And so again, that's my paraphrase of what's going on. But so Elijah told Obadiah, listen, I will be here. When you come, I will be here, so don't worry about it. So verse 16, Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. And of course, probably Obadiah's like, he did stay, he is here. For verse 17, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said to him, is that you, O troubler of Israel? But Elijah answered, I haven't troubled Israel. You and your father's house have troubled Israel. You've forsaken the commandments of the Lord. You followed the Baals. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah, all those who sit at Jezebel's table. Bring all those religious people together, and they hatched a plan. The plan was they will call upon God and see if God answers them. Elijah would call upon God to see if God would answer Elijah. Excuse me, I'll break from the reading just a second. I had this experience one time. Let me tell you a little bit about it. I had a friend, an associate, an acquaintance. He wasn't a friend per se. But he contacted me and he said, Dave Havir, I want to challenge you to a Mount Carmel experience. This is the Mount Carmel experience in the Bible. I want to call upon God, and you call upon God, and whoever God answers will know is the true prophet, the true servant of God, and the other one's a fake. Well, first of all, I don't like to be manipulated. It's not my style. If you go on a hunger strike and you tell me, Dave, I'm going on a hunger strike until you do what I want you to do, that's like a 3-year-old holding their breath. I don't like, with little kids, a 3-year-old says, I'm going to hold my breath until you let me do what I want to do. Excuse me. And so I'm not a big fan of hunger strikes, or I don't like to be manipulated by anybody. And I felt badly for the man. And I actually wrote him a letter. And when you write a letter, writing's there forever. And by the way, I've learned at my college I went to, I really appreciate learning how to speak and to write. Two important skills I learned. It's a lot harder to write than to speak. Now you may say that sounds weird because getting in front of people. But see, getting in front of people, you can see facial expressions. You can hear the tone of the voice, the flex of the voice. Writing to make words come true takes a lot more skill. So I wrote him a letter, and I basically told him, and I poured over it, thought about it. I'm sure it wasn't received well, but I did my best. Some people would say, why do you even take the time? Well, I tried. I basically told him I was sorry for the way he was a clergyman in the previous church. I basically told him I felt sorry that he had been hurt and abused. And then this is the part that I'm sure didn't come across real well, but I recommend that he get some professional counseling. I know, see, that can come across nasty, but I didn't mean it nasty. I tried not to make it nasty. And finally, I did hear from his son. And I thought, oh, great. Here's his son going to be mad at me for picking on his dad. Well, the son, who's not a member of a Church of God, contacted me and said, thank you for the letter you wrote to my dad. So in other words, he saw my heart. He saw my interest in helping the dad. But I refused the Mount Carmel experience with him. By the way, another person I knew from a different part of the country, he also wanted a Mount Carmel experience with me. And at the time I was working with Dixon Cartwright, who had a church newspaper, which, by the way, I liked the church newspaper. I didn't like everything in the church newspaper. I thought some of the stuff in the church newspaper was bad. But I liked it because it was a really chance for people to practice freedom and practice responsibility for their thoughts. Because even in that church newspaper, we would have two different concepts. We'd tell both sides of an issue. We'd present both sides of the issue, and the issues contradicted themselves. So why do we put them in there? To try to help people to think. Because people were letting other clergymen do their thinking for them, and I'm big on freedom, and so that I was very supportive of that. Well, anyway, I went to the publisher of that paper and said, I don't want to do this Mount Carmel experience, but maybe we can get those two guys to do it, because it would make a great story. But I backed off. I didn't do it because I actually felt sorry for both gentlemen. And even while it would have made a great story, people would have loved reading the story about what happened, I felt sorry for the guys. And so I don't doubt their sincerity, but I just think, I don't think we have to be trying to imitate a Mount Carmel experience. Well, the Mount Carmel experience was the prophets of Baal kept yelling out to God, jumping around. They were jumping on the altar, and they busted the altar. They were just very charismatic, jumping on the altar. They busted it. And Elijah would make little comments like, maybe your God's shopping, maybe your God's sleeping, maybe your God's going to the bathroom. That's really one of the phrases he says. That's what he meant. Maybe your God's going to the bathroom. That's why he's not coming. And so he was kind of making little pokes at them. Well, finally, nothing happened. And then it was Elijah's turn. They had to rebuild the altar because the altar was smashed. Then after they rebuilt the altar, then he poured water on it about, I think, 3 times. Poured water on it, filled it 3 times with water. Maybe 4, but 3 times with water. Because it was like, if we're going to call fire from heaven, we're going to call fire from heaven to land where there's a puddle of water, where there's a gathering of water. And you know the story. You know the story about how Elijah prayed to God. God did bring the fire down, lapped up the water, and then later on God did bring rain. Remember the first part of the story? He said, it won't rain until God tells me and I tell you it's going to rain. And so then there was the rain. Now, this is all important because chapter 18, verse 46, the last verse leading into chapter 19, where we're going to spend the rest of the time. Verse 46 says, then the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah. He girded up his loins and ran ahead of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So in other words, now God is with him and he's on his way to his next adventure. After all this, very positive, talking to Ahab with confidence and force, praying to God against 450 and other prophets of Baal for who's God going to be working with. After all this success, we're about to read a very down time in the life of Elijah. The first thing I want you to realize is life is secular. Cycle. Life is very secular. Life goes in cycles. Let me tell you something else I won't spend time talking about. Memories are made because of adrenaline. Adrenaline rushes cause memories. Very positive adrenaline rush cause very positive memories. Negative adrenaline posts negative memories. That's why people who've been physically or sexually abused, actually what happens there, they have a negative adrenaline rush until they zone out. To protect themselves, they have to zone out. But before they zone out, there's adrenaline rush. So in life, have you ever heard the phrase post-feast letdown? People have post-feast letdown because you have a great feast, and then you come home. Again, I shouldn't say this because I don't want his head to get big. Charles Gross was one of the best basketball players I ever played with. And so, in fact, when I think about all the people I played with, he'd be on my all-star team of people I played with. It's 5 different players. I picked them from different churches, different people I played with. People I played with, not that I saw, but played with. He was really good. But I got to compliment the guy sometimes. But what he would tell you in sports and coaching, you don't want the players to get too high or too low. You don't want them to be super high and then they crash. You realize they're going to be ups and downs, but even in life, I would recommend you to have more of this kind of style, flowing instead of people who go this really high and really low. It can be damaging. It can be nerve-wracking. It can be really tough to work through that. So you want to have you're going to have ups and downs. But why do we come to church? You come to church to get your batteries charged. You get your batteries charged with good friends, good Bible study, hopefully a positive message, good food, and then you go home and live your life, and now you live the way of God in front of your coworkers, your family, your neighbors. You're getting your battery, but Sabbath is usually a high time, isn't it? But we don't want it real low time. We just want to kind of even out. Anyway, what's happened is Elijah's going to go through a horrible time, and here's what happens. Chapter 19, verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, So let the gods do to me and also more, if I do not make your life as one of them that you did by tomorrow this time. In other words, you killed my boys, you killed my prophets, I'm going to kill you. Now, how could this man, Elijah, who had such great success, be intimidated by the threat of a woman? A nasty woman, she was nasty. There's nasty men and women in the world, both sexes. But she was nasty and powerful. But she threatened him. Why would he allow this threat to bother him? Because of the cycles. Well, notice how he reacted to this threat. When he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. Yikes, he ran for his life. He went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, even left a servant there. I need to be alone. I need to get out of here. Where are you going? I got to get out of here. There's some raving lunatic woman after me. Verse 4, notice verse 4. He himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. I'd be better off dead. Why keep living? Why keep putting one foot in front of the other? Now again, you may have faced this sometime in your life, that this material from the Bible can help you. Or if you don't face this, maybe you're a positive person, you will come around people who face this, especially as the world's getting crazier. But Elijah said, "It is enough. Lord, take my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." So Moses, Elijah, Jonah, Jeremiah, Job, they all hit the point that they thought, is life worth living? They didn't do it themselves. You don't do it. But you want to break free from it and overcome it just like these fellows did and just like everyone does. So it's not wrong to have horrible thoughts. But you have to, with the help of God and the power of God's Spirit, you overcome those horrible thoughts and move forward. Now, so we have all this success. We now have here, I want to show you 7 concepts from these next verses, these next 14 verses. These 7 concepts that can help you. Okay? The first one is, he gave Elijah physical help. And I would say number 1 is make sure you're getting physical help. Yes, getting the right kind of sleep. Yes, getting the right kind of nourishment. Eating the right kind of foods. This is all very valuable. Exercise can come into this, or exercise can come in number 2. But we need to take care of ourselves. And we need to do that. Notice the example. He lay and slept under a broom tree, and suddenly an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." Get some nourishment in your body. Then he looked, and there was by his head a cake baked of coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and took a nap. If you're stressed out, my friends, start with, what are you doing physically for yourself? It's a good place to start. Now, the second part, after you get physical help, the second part is I call emotional help. Emotional help. Let me give you an example of this. Verse 7. The angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." So he rose, ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. Now you say, where does it talk about emotional help there, Dave? Well, here's how I understand it. I understand that the trip itself did not take 40 days if you're just booging hard to get there. And so sometimes you take a trip and you smell the roses. And for some of you, to get emotional help, some of you did deer hunting because sitting in a deer stand is valuable. Some of you do fishing. Some of you do gardening. Certainly just reading. Bible study can be emotional help, just reading. There's different ways to study the Bible. You study the Bible for correction. You study for history. You study for prophecy. And sometimes you just study for inspiration. But my friends, the life is going so fast. We need to slow down. Some of you will go to the barn dance tonight, I heard. I'll probably pass through the barn dance, won't stay long, but I probably will stop in there. And I'm going to go see a few friends. First of all, I'm going to make sure I see Morris, to let Morris know that I'm supporting the barn dance, which I do. He knows that, but I want him to see that. And I may not even talk to him but for about 30 seconds. But I want to go down and see Morris, for Morris to see that I'm there, and then I've got things I can do later. But now I have to be careful. I may end talking to people and stay longer than I really have time for. But we need a break. I've started something new. I've learned to play dominoes. And I play every Sunday morning. We'll play tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It's dominoes. I love it. I love it. Now, those who play cards with me know that we have a lot of banter. I have a lot of friends around the whole country I play cards with, and we banter, trash talk a little bit, which is fun. But this dominoes, there's no trash talking, there's no banter. It's just quiet. It's just so quiet. Some things I'm doing to keep ahead of the mental game. I continue to do a lot of reading. And I love this dominoes because I just learned it, and I've learned the strategy. And actually, we played last week. We played 2 games. I won both of them, which, again, surprising. The point is, I don't have to win all the games. I just want to play the right moves. Because in anything, like cards or dominoes, a lot of it's what you're dealt with. But I want to play the right moves, so I study it. I put the trains together and all that. The point is, I'm doing it with a lot of widows, by the way. A lot of widows. And they were such good teachers. In fact, whenever I'd make a good move, they would clap for me. It was so sweet. It was so sweet. So I'm willing to play cards with them ruckus people, but I really am enjoying this dominoes just to relax. And we talk. The widows and I, we just talk, and they're good. They're really good. They know, they've been playing it for years, and they're really good at it. The point is, it's relaxing to me. And I would recommend that you find something, not only the physical help, do something for the emotional. Gardening, reading, walking, See, I love fall. I love fall. It's getting a little winter now, but I love the cool breeze. I love sitting outside on a cold day. I just love it. And I just need to do more of that. Anyway, that's the third point. Second point was to the emotional help. And we get to, then the third point is, God listened to Elijah complain. God listened to Elijah complain. There's a preacher in Big Sandy. He's not Church of God. He's a friend of mine. He and I differ on a number of things, but he thinks that if, he believes the name it, claim it. He believes if you say something, God has to give it to you. I don't believe that at all. I believe there's too many examples of how to pray, the way Christ taught to pray. He taught the widow to keep pestering God. So this preacher friend of mine, he says, if you ask God for something twice, you lack faith. Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I believe that you can talk to God. He's my dad. He is dad. And all dads want a conversation with their kids. They want a conversation with teenage kids. Dad loves it when I talk to him. I love talking to him. I love negotiating with him like Abraham did. He said, you negotiate with God? Yeah, if it was good enough for Abraham, I'm try it too. God, would you do this for this many? Would you do this for that many? But again, you have your reasons why you pray what you do, but God listens. And God listened to Elijah vent. So I'm telling you, it's okay to vent to God. Now, if you vent to God, like I vent to God, you have to say you're sorry. You got to get around to saying you're sorry. But don't be afraid to talk to Dad. He is the perfect dad. He's wonderful. But verse 9, the last verse of verse 9, he says, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? What are you doing? And Elijah said, I've been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. They've torn down your altars. They've killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek to hurt me. It's just me and you, God. Everyone's doing bad things. People are doing horrible things. People at work are doing bad things. People at the family are doing bad things. The politicians are doing bad things. Even sometimes in church I see people doing bad things. It's just me and you, God. He's venting. And God's letting him do it. The right type of venting gets poison out of the system. He's venting. So then the fourth point, after he vents and lets him vent, the fourth point is God tells him how he works. God works in a variety of ways. And God tells Elijah how he works. Verse 11, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. Behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountain and broke the rocks in pieces. So God sometimes works in wind, hurricanes, tornadoes, sometimes. If you see a hurricane and tornado hit a country, like I remember one time Pat Robertson made the statement, I don't remember if it was a hurricane or earthquake, hit Haiti. It was probably about 10 years ago. And Pat Robertson on the air said well, God hit Haiti because of the homosexuality there. And I'm like, ooh, Pat, don't say that. I mean, take your stand of what you think right or wrong, but don't attribute to God what may not be from God. And later on, he did some kind of apology. Sometimes, if the wind is, God is in the wind. Sometimes. And sometimes he's in an earthquake. Sometimes. And sometimes he's in a fire. Sometimes. And sometimes he works in a still, small voice. A still, small voice. So I examine when I see wind, when I see earthquakes, and I see fire, I am looking to see what lesson can I learn from it. I would recommend you do the same. But I love listening to the still, small voice. I'm listening to the voice. I'm listening for the voice of God. Now, I don't hear voices, but you sometimes hear biblical things. Now, that's what you hope for the interactive study. You go to interactive study and you're listening. You're listening for good words from God. I'll give you a little opinion, though. I don't hear too many words from God of people who are trying to change me. I hear a lot of the words of God from people who aren't trying to change me. Just so you know, there are always people trying to change everybody. So when I hear people trying to change me, it's like I'm not really catching much from that. But I was down in Huntsville the other day, and I got up there and I said, "Where's our little 98-year-old lady who sits in the back?" And I didn't know it, but they said, well, she had died. They had not told me. I would have gone to her funeral down in Huntsville, I think more in Houston. I would have driven all the way down for her funeral. She happened to be a little black lady, 98 years old. I heard the voice of God from her all the time. She had no interest in changing me. She was just her. She was just her being who she was. I loved listening to her. There was a man here who was not here the last time. I didn't know the little lady's name. Her name now is Gordon, Mrs. Gordon. I didn't know that. I said, "Where's my little friend?" And they said, "Oh, she died." One man who was here was this was a black gentleman. You know his name. He died about 2 years ago. Pardon? Barney? Probably was him. But I just really loved talking to him because I didn't think he was trying to change me in any way, but he just has a lot of good things. So I like to learn from everybody. The people who try to change me, I don't learn too much from them. But people who are just, that's what the interactive study was, just people sharing their thoughts. And I'm listening, learning, drinking in what's being said. No one's trying to show anyone up. No one's trying to be a big shot. Just sharing thoughts. And I like that. I like to listen and just listen to the still small voice. So anyway, he told them different ways he works. And again, I will examine earthquakes and fires and wind. I will examine those things, but I'm always listening for the still small voice. The next thing he said was he listened to his complaints again. The next point, he listened to his complaints again. So in other words, God will sometimes let you complain a little bit. Talk to Dad. He's Dad. I know when I point him out as Dad, some of you had really bad dads. I'm sorry about that. But he's the perfect dad, so he can be the dad to replace. If you had a good dad, he replaces the good dad. If you had a weak dad, he replaces the weak dad. He's Dad. I talk my boys and I. When my boys, we have 2 sons. When my boys wanted money, I would say, "Boys, if you want money, go see Mom. Go see. But if you want freedom, come see me." That's what I would tell my son. So it really was funny. The boys would come to me and say, like, "Dad, we have an idea that might save money." And I would start smiling. And I would start saying, "I got to hear this. I got to hear this." And that's the way Dad is upstairs. I'm sure times I pray to Dad and Jesus Christ sitting at his right hand, and I say, "Dad, I have an idea." I can just see Dad elbowing the son and saying, "We got to hear this one. We got to hear what plan he's come up with." You say, so you kind of you think God views you like you view your kids? Yeah. He listens. And sometimes he looks down, and I'm sure sometimes my boys would say things, and I would just shake my head like, I can't believe that came out of their mouth. And guess what? He does that with me. Sometimes he looks at me, and I'm sure he looks at Jesus Christ and says, "Did he say what I thought he said? Did he really say that? Did your brother say that?" "Yeah, Dad, my brother said that." I view him as a very personal dad, a loving dad, a great dad. And why am I bringing it up? Because I'm hoping you will do the same. I hope you view him. Because he listened twice. He listened to his son complain. Now, by the way, when you let people complain, after a while, you got to be making progress moving forward. So complaining shouldn't be lasting 3 years. Complaining shouldn't be lasting 2 years. Complaining shouldn't even be lasting many months and months and months. If you're moving forward, you squeeze the poison out, and now let's get moving forward. Again, his complaint was, verse 14, "I've been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. They've torn down your altars and they've killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Woe is me, woe is me." The next point, God gave Elijah things to do. Positive things to do. And so I'd recommend when you're going through down times, you've got to find the positive things to do. His specific positive things to do were, go your way in the wilderness of Damascus, Number one, anoint Hazael as king over Syria. Go do that. Number two, anoint Jehu as king over Israel. Go do that. And number three, anoint Elisha as a prophet to take your place. You got that? Do you need to write it down? You got to be doing some stuff. Yes, I know it's woe is me, woe is me. I know it's tough. You did good things, boy. You did good things, son. You did really good things when you stood up. When you went to Ahab, you did great, son. Great, son, you did great when you stood up to the different prophets of Baal. You did great, son. You're kind of down in the dumps a little bit with this Jezebel thing. I know she got the best of you, but this is temporary. Climb out of it. You can do this. You know, you're getting your health back. You're getting emotional stability back. You understand, I heard you complain. Then I also told you different ways I worked. Then I heard you complain again. But, it's time to get moving, time to do things. So I'm too tired to go to church. Well, why don't you go to church anyway? I'm too tired to make food for potluck. Why don't you go ahead and make some food anyway? I'm too tired to be happy on the job and reflect God's good way. Why don't you do it anyway? In other words, after you go through the process of mourning and through the process of recovery, we got to be out doing things. The longer you sit still, things can go badly. And the seventh point was, he basically told them, he reminded them of the big picture. That's what I heard in the study today. Y'all talking about the big picture. That's a good thing to remind about the big picture. And here's what's part of the big picture. Verse 18. I have reserved 7,000 in Israel whose knees have not bowed to Baal. Elijah, you're not the only one. I know you feel like the only one. You feel like the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket, as the expression goes. I know you think that, and you see a lot of bad things happening in the world, and maybe even see impatience in the church, and maybe you see grumpiness in the church, and maybe you see grumpiness with your neighbors and all this. I know it looks like you're the only one doing the right thing, but you're not the only one. By the way, Elijah, there's 7,000 in Israel. That's not everybody, Elijah. You're seeing a lot of bad things because there's a lot of bad things happening, but you're not the only one doing the right thing. And so again, that's a good reminder for us as you sit and do the right thing every week. Have you ever gotten to the point where you've been frustrated because there's so much evil around you? I have. I've been there. I watch evil around me and I get frustrated and like, I've never said it this way, but I've had the attitude is, am I the only one doing it the right way? I never really said that, but I've had thoughts leaning that way. And so it's good to remember, okay, Dave, you keep on doing good stuff, but you're not the only one doing good stuff. And we can put your name in there too. You're doing good things, but you're not the only one doing good things. So anyway, that's my little presentation for today. I don't think I took my full hour, did I? So more time to eat. But so again, just I wanted to remind you again how when you face tough times, God set a pattern there of how you can work through your tough times. And if you don't need to work through it, you know people who will. And you will find the right way to give those valuable truths from the Bible to help them out. So anyway, God helped Elijah, he will help you. And thus ends the lesson today of 1 Kings 19, verses 1 through 18.